All right, at this point, we have, I think, almost everybody that replied yes to the meeting invitation. But I do want to give us just another couple of minutes. We had some maybes that I'm not seeing yet. So thank you all for your patience. We'll get started in just a moment. All right. I think we have everybody with us that we're going to have for today. So we're going to get started with some quick introductions just to get us kicked off. And if other folks filter in as we do, wonderful. So I think most of our committee members, with maybe the exception of Billy, were on our last meeting. But we do just want to run through again and introduce you to some new faces, most of which are on our Roost team. So for anyone that has not met me yet, my name is Eileen Mowry. I am the Lake Placid and Whiteface Region Manager here at Roost. And so I am overseeing this project with lots and lots and lots of support from our amazing Roost team, some of whom you may know, some of whom you may not. So we do have Emily. Emily, you want to kick it off and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily. I'm the website designer here at Roost. It's nice to see you all.
Excellent. And we have Lee Campbell with us.
Good morning, everyone. I've worked with some of these faces in the past. I'm graphic designer here at Roost and looking forward to this project.
We have Lane with us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lane. I'm the data analyst here.
A face many of you know, Catherine Erickson.
Hi, Catherine Erickson, Lake Placid Community Liaison with Roost.
We have Aurora with us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aurora. I am the content manager. I will be working on the brand statement revisions for this project, so I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
And then some of our fearless leaders, we have Jason Lawrence.
Jason Lawrence, Director of Digital Strategy.
Michelle Clement.
Good morning, Michelle Clement, Director of Marketing.
And then Mary Jane.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm MJ Lawrence. I am the Chief Operating Officer here at Roost. And Lane, thank you and all of your time and efforts, and look forward to moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you, team. And then I am going to kick it over to you, Billy. I do believe you're the only new face for the group. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself briefly.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Billy Walton here, owner of Experience Outdoors in Lake Placid, a company I started about 8 years ago now, from the ground up, and happy to be a part of the team.
Awesome. Well, we're very happy to have you. Am I incorrect? Is there anyone that wasn't here for our last meeting? Anyone else? All right, wonderful. Well, we're going to jump into our presentation in just a moment here. I'll be sharing my screen as we go through. If you have any questions as we move along, please don't hesitate to either physically raise your hand, digitally raise your hand. We will be sending these slide decks around after the meeting, so don't feel like you need to memorize everything at first pass. There's going to be a lot of data in today's presentation, so you will have all of that coming to you in the slide decks after the fact. All right, is everyone able to see my screen all right? Yes, excellent. All right. So today we are going to be reviewing the brand survey results. Our last meeting, we went over a brief overview of the project, our process, our timeline, and today we're going to start digging into the brand survey that we've been circulating. Quick agenda for us today. Again, we're going to go over that process and timeline just briefly to give us a sense of where we are in that process. We will have a quick overview of the brand survey, then the survey results. Those survey results, we're going to break into both the local insight and the visitor insight. We did survey for kind of both audience segments. We will have a quick review of what a brand is to kick off our feedback conversation. And then we will go through both the brand statement and the visual brand to collect some feedback from you on both of those elements. And then we'll have a quick look at next steps. So for that process and timeline. So our last meeting was really phase one, outlining those goals of the project. That's also something that, we've been working on behind the scenes here at Roost. So at this point, we do feel like we have that phase one fairly well handled, and we're moving into that phase two of the brand process, reviewing the research data. So that's going to be today's meeting. We are at that mid-November point, reviewing with you the community and visitor survey results. Our next meetings, we will start to review the draft brand statement that we compile based on your feedback, survey data feedback, and then our inner workings as well. And we'll also have a visual mood board for the visual brand. So those logo elements, those stylized elements. So that'll be what we're moving into next. Today, we're on those survey results. And a reminder of the feedback we're looking for from you. Today is going to be focused on that brand statement and that visual brand. We're really not going to get too much into website side of things today. We're really going to be focusing just on that brand. And across all of these projects, we want you to continually be thinking, does this positively and accurately represent Lake Placid? So as we move into the brand survey, I am going to turn presentation over to Lane, our data analyst, and I will step back. Lane, just let me know when you're ready for the next slide.
Awesome. Thank you, Eileen. Again, I'm Lane Dowdle. I'm the data analyst here at Roost. I put this survey together. Eileen, you go to the next slide. So just a general overview of why we put this together. We wanted to gather opinions on the brand on Lake Placid from the people of Lake Placid, from the people who live there. We did also gather some insights from visitors, so those visiting the area as well. Today, I'm going to walk you through that insight. So we're going to focus on just local insight, and then we're going to look into how that compares to how visitors responded as well. You all took the survey. Your results are included in here as well. Or I hope you all took the survey. Eileen, you can go to the next slide. So just general overview of that respondent breakdown. We had just over 1,700 responses and around 200, just over 200 local responses here. For that local margin of error, it's just at 6%, 95 confidence level. And then average age 55 for that local insight, which is what we're going to be focusing on first. Eileen?
Would you mind just speaking a little bit more to that confidence level, what those numbers mean?
Yeah, so what that means is that for any of these percentages, like the interval that it could be on either side is 6%. There's that margin on either side for these percentages when we're looking at them.
Thank you, Lane.
Of course. So looking into that local insight. So this is respondents who responded, they live in the area, work in the area, own a business in the area. So the first question we asked was, based on your knowledge, would you, if you were to recommend Lake Placid as a travel destination, rate the following statements? Really what stood out here is that outdoor rec was strongest. People were really focused on outdoor rec as well as sightseeing opportunities and family-friendly atmosphere. That's where everyone was in the most agreement on. There was some slight variance when looking at the committee responses. Those blue and red plus marks indicate that, so the red indicates that the committee responses were higher for disagree, and the blue indicates that committee responses were higher for agree. So you all had higher margins of disagree for historical attractions. It's accessible for residents and visitors. You had a higher margin of agree for it has water-based activities to enjoy. This is going to offer great insight on what activities people are interested in.
Can I interject real quickly?
Please, yes.
Yeah, so I think the variations, like it's good we talked last meeting about the importance of sort of setting aside our personal bias when we can to think about, because this has to match like the traveler message as well. And so it's really good that Lane pointed these out for us so we can see like, okay, so overall, this is what visitors or this is what the community feels like. This as a committee, as a group, there was some variation in these areas. So you got to kind of keep that in the back of your head around like, oh, okay, so here's where I feel this way about it, but as a whole, the community feels a little different about it. So it's really good to just keep that in the back of your head as we move through.
So Eileen, you can go to the next slide. So the next questions we asked were based around specific activities in the area and whether or not you all believed, or the local opinion believed, that it was better or worse than other Adirondack destinations. So top activities there were hiking, golfing, and cross-country skiing. Cross-country skiing has that blue plus mark, which means you all thought had a higher margin of better for that one. You all had this higher margin for road cycling as well. But at the low end of those activities, you can see there's sailboating, hunting, agritourism. Those ones were kind of at the bottom end there. And you all had higher margins of disagree for those as well. So just a little stronger opinion on disagree for those activities and higher margins of agree for some of those top activities there. In the middle, we have, some swimming, birding. Those are kind of those middle activities there. Eileen, we can keep moving.
Can I just ask for a quick question on that slide?
Yes.
Just the cross-country skiing was the only skiing. There wasn't like alpine skiing. Was that?
Can you go back to that slide? Oh, there it is. Thanks.
Yeah, that one was not, was focused on cross-country skiing, I guess. You can keep moving. Okay, so these questions were open-ended. Just trying to gather insight.
So I just have a question, Lane. So what happened with that there was no downhill skiing was not mentioned as, or we didn't give it as an option?
It doesn't have a downhill ski mountain. Lake Placid.
Oh, so we didn't put it as an option?
Yeah.
Technically, with it falling into the Whiteface region, that may have been why that version of BOI was not included.
We do have some other data. We could go back and look and get some opinion on the types of activities. Obviously, we know that most folks who go to Whiteface to ski stay in Lake Placid, so that's a true statement. But we can go back and look at some of that data.
Yeah, I would just include that.
Yep. No, I can see that, Darcy. Thanks. That's good feedback.
Definitely good feedback. So again, these were open-ended responses just to gather quick, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Lake Placid? Now, looking at these responses, what really stood out was Olympics. That was a word that came up a lot, as well as beauty, and then outdoor rec. Hiking individually and outdoor rec also stood out. That was a specific activity within that outdoor rec that did rank high for local insight. We can keep moving, Eileen. What are your favorite things about Lake Placid? This one had similar responses to the question before. Beauty did outrank outdoor rec here. Olympics wasn't really included in this one, which would make sense. Olympics isn't really an activity you can participate in, but people was good to see on this one. People really like the people here, community is on there as well. These local responses did include those sort of buzzwords, which was really good to see. Next one. Now, back one. If you could change one thing about Lake Placid to make it better, what would it be? Now, this one was really focused on pretty much affordability. And then parking was also ranked up there as well. There were some responses that were, better shopping, better food, but affordability did dominate these responses here. Next one. What makes you proud of Lake Placid? This is not one that you all were asked, but it was included in the original collector. So history was the main response that stood out here. And then beauty, Olympics, people as well made it on here. There will be another opportunity to collect additional feedback from you all on this. So if you do have additional thoughts that you would like to share on the statement, please do. Next.
Can I jump in real quick with a question? Is that like the affordability slide especially, are you now just pulling answers from the local community, or is this still the entire pool of 1,700 people?
So this first part is just local responses.
Gotcha.
And then we will look at visitor responses. So how well does the brand statement describe Lake Placid? Majority believed it described Lake Placid very well, but there was also a high margin that responded somewhat, around 40% there. It was good to see that there was not a high margin responding not at all. But again, there is that split kind of between somewhat and very well. It's a slight majority for very well. And then just looking at the images, somewhat was dominant here. There wasn't really that very well high margin there. It was pretty much split. It was pretty split between not at all, very well, and then somewhat dominated that response there. So it seems like the brand, just looking at the visitor response, the imagery seems to be less aligned. The brand statement seems to be have more support currently. Next. Diving into the visitor insights. So they were asked the same questions. They had the same kind of rankings as you all, except they were a little more agreeable. So as you can see in that chart on the left there, the percent difference between their agree versus the local agree. There were some pretty high margins, especially when it looks at affordability. They were more likely to agree that the Lake Placid area has affordable travel, lodging, and dining options. And they were also more likely to agree that it's accessible as well. That one had a pretty high margin.
Yeah,
so
that is
agreeable.
I say, Lane, you kind of said it, but the percent difference is sort of like the really important column when we're considering like how we feel about it and like what the traveler feels. Affordability is actually a really interesting one that it turns out that the bulk of travelers feel like, yeah, Lake Placid's fairly affordable, and probably compared to other destinations, that's probably true. But locally, we're like, Jesus, everything's so expensive. I don't understand. So there's a real gap there. MJ,
What was the second part? I missed that. You said affordability and
accessibility.
Oh, accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
But people are thinking about affordability in totally different ways. People who are thinking about affordability here are thinking about housing and static costs, and people who are traveling are just thinking about what a hotel room costs and a dinner out.
Right. I was going to say the same thing, Katie. They're saving up for the special occasion. The rest for the locals, it's the day-to-day things like rent and food, and it's inflated because it's a visitor community by virtue of the definition.
Mm-hmm. And I think we get some of that response. We'll see as we dive into the short answer questions that that affordability is more focused on lodging rather than, the local response is more focused on affordable housing, affordability for the day-to-day, where those visitor responses are going to be more focused on affordable lodging, affordable dining, those sorts of items. And there is that difference there that we will keep in mind through this brand development and how visitors look at the brand versus residents. Next. So here, locals were more likely to, so looking at these margins, the locals more likely to respond that the hunting was better, as well as agritourism, sailboating. Where visitors are more likely to respond that they were the same. These were pretty similar spread compared to the local breakout. Again, those differences are noted on the left there. Moving. So just looking at those short answer questions that we mentioned, visitors more likely to respond that it was peaceful. Olympics was more noted when we just looked at the local opinion, and beauty was synonymous with both. They took both were top ranking there. Next. What are your favorite things? Again, beauty and outdoor rec dominated these short answer questions. Hiking ranked higher when looking at just those visitor opinions. And then the beauty and the dining were ranked higher for that visitor opinion as well. It was good to see people there was the people that showed up on the local responses that didn't show up as much on the visitor responses. And I think that is good to speak to the community that the local insight sees. If you could change one thing, again, this is the one that I was talking about. You can see that difference between affordable housing versus affordable lodging. So you can see these responses here. The visitor response is much more focused on affordable lodging, although there was some mention of affordable housing throughout the region as well. Parking was a big issue though, that was mentioned in this visitor response. Next. Now, this was pretty different. So just looking at that visitor response, they were a lot more likely to agree that the brand statement represented Lake Placid very well, by an over 25% margin there, where that local response is more split to somewhat. Next. Same thing here, more likely to respond very well. That did have the majority margin there, but somewhat did have a high margin here as well. So again, we're seeing here that that brand itself, that imagery, has a little bit less support than the statement itself. Next. So just to kind of summarize quick before we get into what is a brand, our takeaways here. So what we really saw from these results is that there was kind of a low brand logo satisfaction there, a real split between on both the local and the visitor side of things with that imagery itself. There seemed to be some brand misalignment when looking at those short answer questions and the additional responses from you all. So really going forward, we're going to try to, you know, I'll send it back over to Eileen. Gather this feedback and go into the new brand.
I just want to add one more quick anecdote. So the last time the brand was really cracked open was between 2008 and 2010. And at that time, when a local survey was done, the local survey came back much, much stronger than this one did on the Olympic side. And it's interesting that even locally, that sentiment has dropped a little bit. And of course, the Lake Placid brand focuses on outdoor rec. The tourism brand, at least, focuses way more on outdoor rec than the Olympic side. And we're still seeing that, but it's interesting, just as a note, that residents are sort of aligning themselves a little more with the traveler view in terms of like outdoor rec versus the Olympics and the importance of that to Lake Placid. So just thought that was really interesting over time, the last decade or so. That's definitely shifted a bit. The Olympics were still in there, of course, they're still important. And folks thought that was a really important part of Lake Placid, but definitely, outdoor rec and sort of the outdoors dwarfs that.
Yeah, great takeaways to keep in mind as we move forward into this. Thank you, Lane, so much. Appreciate that. Do we have any questions on those survey results before we move on? And feel free to speak right up because I'm sharing screen. I can't see all of you. So if you're just waving your arms, I don't know. Okay. Sounds like not. I am going to pass it over to Michelle Clement for a quick review of what a brand is, just to frame the rest of our conversation.
Thank you, Eileen. And you can kind of jump to the next slide. I did touch on this at the last meeting. But again, just to think about the brand, there's one thing to think about the brand. And when we talk about the brand statement, which will be what Eileen will be digging really into next, is really about how we position the region. What is that tone? Or the community of Lake Placid, what is the tone that we want to use, and making sure that it truly aligns with what people experience and how they view it, as opposed to how we feel or want it to be represented. So we'll be talking a lot about the brand statement, and then we'll move on to the logo and the visual brand, which is this is how the mark that we're using and how does it best link to and convey that brand statement as part of that whole brand package. So we'll continue to work through that as we go through this meeting today.
Excellent. So our brand statement, this is that written portion. This is the portion that we saw more people aligning with what we already have. There was still that sort of kind of not entirely that somewhat response, but we did see more positive alignment with the brand statement. So keeping that in mind as we move forward, our current brand statement as it is now, last meeting we went through and did a dramatic reading. This time I'll leave it for folks to skim real quick before we move on into our kind of feedback conversation. But again, these slides will be coming to you afterward. We don't expect you to kind of internalize all of it in this moment. So our feedback on the brand statement. What we really want to be thinking about here is what aspects do we want to keep and what aspects do we want to change? So we do, we understand that it's hard to provide all of your feedback and thoughts in a format like this. So we will provide time after this meeting for you to get feedback to us in written format, but we do want to just start a conversation, start working together on what some of those things we want to keep and what some of those things we want to change are. Any other thoughts from team before we open up the floor? All right. So you, our committee, what thoughts do you have? Would it be helpful if I kind of go back to the brand statements?
Yes, you can put it on the screen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Eileen, I have a quick thought, just coming off of the metrics around Olympics sort of fading into the distant past. Is that because, is some of that because that's just not what's being marketed? I mean, it's hardly in the brand statement. If we're marketing this region, or if the goal is to market this region as a place where we have events that are using Olympic venues and try to continue funding, those activities and those jobs in this area, maybe we need to make that a little bit more exciting and talk about how people can go take a bobsled ride on a former Olympic track and how they can, access some of those venues in exciting ways as something that's front loaded as opposed to just like hidden in the footnote.
Katie, I really like that. And especially with all of the new funding that's been put in and the new Olympic Museum. I mean, if one of the negative things that we get feedback from is, that the arts and culture side is lacking a little bit, having that piece be put back in with the passport being back, the museum, the new lights on the side of the building are a great photo op. I mean, just even the Romer's Cafe with the view and everything. I think that that's a great idea.
To Katie's point, I think if you argue that the Olympics is sort of buried in there, so is outdoor and outdoor rec. So everything can't be first. And we need to be cautious, obviously, of detail. And I don't want to dismiss the local community, but to have the very first statement really be about us, I guess it sort of depends on who the audience is for the brand statement, right? So the very first, the two sentences after the lead in are all about us and not about the place.
I think that's
if
great.
That makes sense.
Laura, I'm just going to jump in real quick, if that's all right. Just one thing when we work with these brand statements is this is a piece that we use for, positioning the marketing. It's not going to be like written in this exact way for like a brochure, for example, or like the homepage to a website. The idea is to really capture the tone of how we want to make sure the advertising sounds and feels like this, and B, what are like some of the top priorities we want to make sure that are in the marketing. So then the order, not so much the order, but making sure like what are those top kind of differentiators are mentioned and that the tone is on. That just helps.
Yeah, and I get that completely. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say my comment on tone is more like that excitement. I mean, you can go, like, there are some pretty cool things and activities that people can access around here that tie directly to those venues and that Olympic spirit. And like Catherine said, the history, like as a local person, I guess what I would say I'm proud of in this region is certainly the natural beauty, but it's that Olympic history is huge and rich.
Yeah, I would just
think as go ahead.
No, I'd start. No, I was just going to add, and I know this was a historical brand statement, but where we've come from over the past 8 years in particular, we are an event-based destination now. And I obviously, I think that piece of it probably just needs to come into this to some degree.
I'd like to
and I agree with Katie on the excitement piece of it. And because I think, the Olympic venues to some extent, to Darcy's point, the event-based, whether it's Olympic venue events or other events. I mean, I think that other communities would argue that they're a real community that's walkable and you can see the stars and et cetera, et cetera. And there are many places in the Adirondack Park where you can see stars far better than you can here, obviously. So I think it's just a question of emphasis, not necessarily of content.
Yeah, I think it's about
So
spirit.
I have a question, Michelle, what we're trying to do now, because it sounds like we're talking about redirecting our marketing a little bit, to highlight, the importance of the Olympics and the venues and the events in the region. Is that the goal of this? And I do agree, like with the excitement and, highlighting the community and the main street. Is that really what we want to go? I'm just looking for a little clarity.
So I can jump in there, and then I do see that Ben's hand is up, so I want to turn it over to him when I'm done here. But I think it's a little bit of a mix. This isn't exactly directing all of the marketing and the priorities and how we break out budgets and campaigns and those kind of things. What it does is what that message sounds like when we do those things. And I think what we're touching on here, especially to the Olympics, is right now it is in here, but it says the world came here twice to hold its Olympic Winter Games. What's missing there is it talks about the history, but not the fact that you can still feel that Olympic spirit, you can experience it, the new ways that you can kind of participate through events and the new developments of the attractions, etc. So, I think that's a good catch that it's in here, not so much where the positioning is, because if we move it up to the first sentence, it doesn't mean we're going to do more marketing on it or less marketing based on where it's positioned in here. But what is the tone we want to say when we talk about the Olympic Winter Games? Does that help clarify?
And that was good.
And then
is Ben up?
I do want to turn it over to Ben if we can.
Well, Michelle, you answered some of my question already a little bit, but I was curious. I wanted to step back and ask you all as the Roost team. I always think of rebrands as part of position, pivoting to make sure you're reaching the groups that you want to be reaching. So I don't know if we've really addressed this yet, but I am curious to hear from you all. Are there groups of people, audience groups that we are not reaching right now that you think this rebrand can help us reach? Because I think that helps to answer some of the questions about tone, values, and so forth, and topic material as well.
Well, I would say from the age of the responses, it looks like younger people.
Yep.
That would just be my guess from the data we saw today.
Absolutely.
That would be pretty accurate, Katie, in terms of the folks that we're trying to reach. Average age in the US is a hair under 40, I think, right now. And so we'd love to be like more on target with that. And that comes down to a bit of the type of leisure activity. We did see, actually, interestingly enough, during the pandemic, when outdoor rec was sort of what folks were focusing on, we did see ages skew much younger, which was a good thing. And we had a chance to introduce a lot of those younger folks to the Adirondacks. But yeah, that would definitely been the goal, would be to like try and bring it down. And I think there's some really good points here around sort of capturing that excitement of events and venues is definitely missing from this statement. And I think that's really good feedback for sort of how to integrate that. Even the Olympic statement is that, oh, here's something that happened. It's not a present thing. It's not top of mind. I think that's really good. This is exactly the sort of feedback we need. Yeah, good stuff.
Hey, Jason, the other thing that this makes me think of is, the market that you currently have is obviously that, 50 to 60, right? Skewing a little closer to 60. Is the goal to expand the market or to make the market you already have happier, like engage it more? I don't know. That's kind of up to you guys. But if it was to try to expand it into a younger crew, the other thing that I would say might be worth bringing in is like nightlife. Those responses around like things to, like the dining was good, but I think I saw that the sort of, attractions or like things to do at night wasn't super high. So maybe there's, a chance to focus on that too.
Yeah.
I also think that if you had a lower, if the age of your respondents were lower, I think that the affordability of lodging would look different.
And that could be, so of course Roost works with multiple regions, and we do see that some of those regions are very happy to increase, the older demographic as well as the younger. Oftentimes Lake Placid is pretty full. And so, one of our concerns in terms of our strategic plan is, looking forward 10, 15, 20 years from now, we want to make sure that we don't, as put it bluntly, as those folks die off, we want to make sure that we replace them with younger travelers sooner rather than later, so that those folks get familiar with Lake Placid in the area. So a little bit of both, I guess, Katie, to answer kind of maybe both parts of that question. Obviously we want everybody to have a great experience while they're here and to improve that. And currently the folks with the most money are a little older. But we also want to make sure that that younger demographic, as that wealth transfer happens over the next 2 decades, they learn about Lake Placid and want to come here too.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things too to also just kind of add on to that. Is one is I'd be cautious not just to use the age demographics from this survey to be kind of the metric of who's currently our existing audience, because there definitely is a demographics that's more likely to complete surveys than those that are not. So I think looking at the big picture of, mobile tracking data and some other pieces there, but definitely I think we're hearing that, how do we position this for the next generation of travelers so it can kind of continue to have some legacy for another 10 years is one goal. And then part 2 is, I'd love to hear from some of the other kind of people on the call, as well as some different backgrounds, as well as what your thoughts are. Carolyn, I'm going to call on you. See if you have any feedback or thoughts.
Did you say Carolyn?
Yes. You happen to be on the screen. Sorry.
Yeah, so all good things so far. I think one thing that stood out to me that's currently in the brand statement, the adventure, fun, romantic, like it does kind of hit all the different activity, like feelings that we want to make sure are attracting people. That's hitting individuals, couples, families of all ages. And I think it does set us apart from other regions to hit all of those different people. So I would vouch for, even if it's not those specific words, but making sure we're keeping that adventurous, romantic, and fun feeling.
Awesome. Thank you.
Brian, you have your hand up?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm driving, so I wanted to share. I was just going to point, I don't disagree. I actually agree with everything that's been said about the body of the statement, the paragraph, which I recognize doesn't manifest itself on the website anywhere, but the sentence at the top does. I mean, that's what we use as our positioning statement. And I was just going to point out that none of the things we're talking about around nature or Olympics, those words don't appear in that statement. Invent your perfect day, but it doesn't feel like it's grounded in the same benefits that we convey in the paragraph. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
I think that's some very interesting feedback, and part of that is like that kind of positioning statement, that tagline that we use, invent your own perfect day. Originally was from the point of like everybody has like a little bit different perspective. Some are really looking for that outdoor recreation, others might be looking for the history, some might be looking for arts and culture or dining or amenities, and you have that perfect combination of different pieces to my perfect day may be very different than your perfect day. So that's the kind of positioning we've been working with, and that's I'd love to hear some other feedback on that just tagline piece there.
Catherine.
I love the perfect day. And I do agree with, branching it out, maybe even in the brand statement of how to do that. As Brian said, but that invent your perfect day, I think, is really important to Lake Placid, because it is very different than a lot of the communities that you can go to where it's just outdoors or just arts and culture, just dining or whatever it is. It really is very well rounded. I mean, sometimes for locals it can seem a little bit like it's not, because we're here all of the time, but to somebody coming here, for a long weekend or something, there are a lot of different types of activities to do. So people really can, I think it's a very true statement. People can really invent their perfect day in Lake Placid, doing many different things.
Hi, it's Darcy. I agree with that. I think it works. I think this place has just a unique set of things to do that no place offers, and you can do it any way you want. And I think that goes a long way from, I mean, I know this isn't necessarily the positioning statement, it's the brand statement, but that's a true statement of place, the diversity of the options of what people can do, whether it's lay low to, go big with a big event. So I think all the pieces fit with a statement like that. And then just on the first sentence, and again, just back to that Olympic spirit and adventure, I do think that is part of the essence of our community. Passion and spirit and sense of community, those things kind of go together. So if there's a way to modify the word welcome to be more on the side of spirit, Olympic spirit, where that is just part of our fabric. And it's kind of the way of life, whether it is on the recreational side or in excellence of sports. We've talked a little bit about the events, but also we're a training facility for athletes, and that's a big part of this community as well. And something that no other place offers, where you can rub elbows in a grocery store and walk down a main street and have this international appeal when just visiting for hiking. So I do think there's probably an element of the passion and spirit and sense of community that we can heighten when it comes to the Olympics and the heritage.
Thank you, Darcy. I do want to be mindful of time. We do want to get into the visual brand as well. Before we shift over, I do want to just check in on Steve, kind of looking more toward that Keene Valley area. Are there any thoughts that you have, or anyone else that's kind of, outside of Lake Placid proper?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of our traffic is people coming in and out of Placid from the East Coast. So all these events that come in are very helpful traffic wise. Invent your own perfect day. I got my survey in a little late, but I sent in like a little Bar Harbor, Maine has their website has like plan your day. And it's actually really cool. And I kind of think it fits in with invent your perfect day. And you can kind of, as you click through it, it shows you the different options and everything. But I think that gets more into the functionality of the site rather than the statement. But yeah, I mean, the Olympic Winter Games, everything up here is driving traffic through our small town. So I kind of lost my train of thought, but just getting the people through Keene and into Lake Placid is what it is. And I mean, it all fits in together. I mean, whether somebody's coming to Lake Placid, they easily come down to Keene as well for a day to go hiking. So it all fits in, everything, even the Olympic stuff. We get the athletes down here all the time. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Sorry to call you out.
Can I jump in real quick, just as someone from Keene? I think that, like, as someone with an Airbnb property, the thing that I point to is that Lake Placid has sort of like the bustling downtown. They have like the restaurants and the bars and all of that, and that's like a big draw where people can be tucked away down here, but then they can go up to Lake Placid for the excitement. And so if there's a way to maybe work into the brand statement something about that draws attention to that bustling downtown opportunity, I feel like that might be another way to both engage young people and also scratch the back of like the surrounding areas where people might be going to escape.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. Any other feedback on the brand statement before we move on to the visual brand? I know there's probably a lot more to say. And as I said, we do encourage you to continue to compile your feedback and send it to us after the meeting. But we do want to make time for the visual conversation as well. All right. In that case, I am going to move on to that visual brand. So our current visual brand, this is what we're looking at in terms of our logo, different variations of it. We'll show you also the color, the font. So this is kind of what we're what we're working with right now, our basis for moving forward. And again, we're looking for that feedback, the what do we want to keep and the what do we want to change. With a reminder that while the brand statement folks, kind of almost down the middle did feel that it either very well described Lake Placid or at least somewhat described Lake Placid, there was less of that connection and that confidence in this visual brand. So again, putting it back up on the screen for reference, but some thoughts on what we want to keep, what we want to change, and how we feel like we could bring this visual component of the brand more in line with that statement and with both the local and the visitor sentiment.
While we're looking at it, is it possible for Lane to remind us what the feedback was? Like, did the visitors liked it, is what I remember more?
Yeah, visitors are more likely to respond that it represented Lake Placid very well. Let me pull up the numbers quick. So non-local respondents more likely to respond that the statement describes Lake Placid very well by 25% more. So there was a pretty high margin. Where local residents were more likely to respond somewhat or not at all. And it was mostly skewed in the somewhat.
But
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, just to clarify too, like it was definitely better for visitors, but it wasn't great either. We were at what, 50, would you say 53% or something like that? Was something like that, if I remember off the top of my head. But so it wasn't great. We'd like to have a much better brand alignment number if at all possible. Yeah.
And Jason, you were on the original committee, right, that designed this?
Oh no, no, that was all before all of us.
I remember the party. It was across the street at the upstairs of Nicola's, where it was like all came out, I guess. But there's a lot of depth to it. Like there's reasons for the cuddlers and the mountain. I mean, when I remember that hearing about it, I thought that it really did represent the visual brand. So from my perspective, I'm a little surprised at that. As a person that was new to the community at that point, when I look at that, I can almost visualize Lake Placid.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit of like, we can always come up with meanings in visual brands, which is good. It's good to have an underlying like reason for why you're doing something, and feel freely if you have thoughts on this too, jump in. But so there's a sun in here. If you look, there's a moon in here. You have the mountains, the waves, the little wavy things represent water. There's like all of it is in there. If you read the brand book, you can actually, there's whole explanations in there of all the things. But if we're missing the mark and folks don't feel that it aligns, then we still miss the mark.
Yeah, and that was going to sort of be my feedback, that I think I also remember there being a lot of, because I had just gotten into the community when this was sort of released, and there is a reason behind every single piece of it. And I think to Jason's point, the question is, there's all this reasoning in the back room, but people aren't processing it that same way, is what the results seem to indicate. I don't object to this visual, but it's clearly not resonating as strongly as I think we need it and want it to.
Yeah. And I did just the background of what the different shapes and colors mean, that in the branding guidelines have been referenced, that I did drop that into the chat. But Lori, I think you said it very clear, is, while that may have a lot of meanings, the feedback is it might not exactly lock up with what the brand statement is and what the message is we're trying to display. And some is just opinions on, how it makes them feel. Colors, shapes, those things. Ben, your hand's up again.
Yeah, just a couple general thoughts. I'm not a designer by trade, so I'm not going to necessarily be able to provide you some substantive ideas here, but a couple of things. One, I do think the brand as it stands tries to do way too much. I think from what I understand, modern, recent design trends are towards more minimalism. I think it's a flat image, all of that. That's good. But I think, invent your own perfect day, be Lake Placid, Adirondacks USA as an example, is too much. I also personally believe the Adirondacks USA tagline is a little like, the Adirondack Park is part of New York State. And I think emphasizing that New York heritage is an opportunity here. And I think it goes back to some of the things we talked about with the Olympics and and the Adirondack Park as a whole as being this crown jewel for the park or for the state. So there's an opportunity there. I also think the imagery that it utilizes doesn't exemplify any of the iconic features of Lake Placid to me. I mean, I think you have opportunities with the ski jumps, you have opportunities with Whiteface and Mirror Lake as examples. So I think there's an opportunity to incorporate one of those, and I would suggest in a minimalist manner, probably fewer colors as well.
May I pose to the group, what are general sentiments on the colors? Just to dig into a very specific aspect.
When I look at it, I just think of Olympics, right? I didn't
They're
see
the Olympic colors.
Yeah, I didn't see the sun. I didn't see the moon. The mountains to me kind of represent West Coast mountains more than East Coast mountains. I made that same mistake in my logo because they're kind of rounded down here, over here. But yeah, you kind of get lost. I didn't realize how many things it was trying to say. And to read a book to figure it out, I think that kind of tells you that it's saying too much without saying a lot. I just kind of get lost in it.
Steve, are you saying that you do see the Olympic colors in this logo, or you don't?
So I do, like, I even like just I don't even know technically what all the Olympic colors are, but when I think of Lake Placid, I think of the Olympics. So when I see this logo, colors are just flashing into my head, and it's making me think, okay, I see a circle with a bunch of bright colors. Is that shooting the Olympics at me?
I was thinking that I wish it had more obvious Olympic connotations.
In the colors or in the mark itself?
In the colors. Like when I think, I guess my like quintessential Lake Placid imagery and color palette is like the 1980 Olympics with, the raccoon.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of coming back is, people like the retro stuff.
Totally agree.
But how long is that going to last as well? So that's where minimum is good, because it's going to last as well.
And also, I do want to just kind of keep it on our minds that Olympic part of it is, it's a big part. But that beauty, that outdoor recreation was also top for both locals and visitors. So we do want to find that balance between the two.
Yeah, the Olympics.
And I agree with what everyone's saying. And I think this because I haven't looked that hard at it. I don't think most of us have. It does, to Steve's point, it feels a little bit old, but I also agree with Ben that it is quite busy, and that some simplicity might give us some longevity.
I can comment from our team side. This is the colors of this logo are we always hear really good things about it in terms of when folks see it in full color. They're like, oh, that's bright and vibrant. And like Eileen, you commented, like people were picking up the stickers at the show you were just at like crazy because it's a bright, fun, colorful sticker. It is very hard to put on anything in full color. We often have to come up with a way to put it on white. You cannot go over top of an image or anything. So oftentimes in marketing materials, it is just black or white, because we cannot, you just can't put all those colors on top of anything else. So that is one of the challenges.
The layers of
sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
Layers of this slide kind of help that too. Is a lot of times for advertising, you'll want that rich image to sell something. We'll want to put a logo on top of it. So if we were to remove this white kind of grayscale piece behind it that's semi-transparent, you would not be able to like actually put that full color logo on that image. So we end up using a lot of times just as a full white logo.
So I was not working here when this was launched, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, where is our high-end kind of understated, elegant look that I thought we were going for? But on the other side of that, working here, and when we go to trade shows or when we're doing stickers or when it definitely pops opposed to, you know, other brands that you're on, you know, other sides of, like specifically at trade shows with banners or, so two sides to that, I guess.
I like Ben's point though to simplicity and sort of the iconic, you know, the iconic goal. Like if you were looking at something that was ski jumps with a mountain behind it and still incorporating some sort of scenic, you know, whether that's moon, stars, or sunset or something like that, you could probably have a really effective color and just, you know, white logo mark that stood the test of time, captured Lake Placid, and still, you know, was simple and obvious.
I agree. And
It's
it's similar to like what Orta just did with all of their, you know, one color. They really do stand out. But this also looks kind of nostalgia to me now, and if that's coming back, that could be a bonus too.
Hey, it's Darcy. Can I just add? So I was actually at Ed Workshop back in the day, I think when this was created, and it wasn't done by Ed Workshop, but I think we were working on the website. And I think at the time, it made sense in terms of the colors and everything. I remember one takeaway for me was, where was the green? And it was more because as a destination and with all of our, you know, nature and mountains and everything, that was just one color that I was kind of baffled that wasn't included, but I get the need for it to stand out. I will say I've always liked the font. And that has been something that I think is pretty unique. And I liked how that always, but the swirly thing is, it's a little too complicated, I think, in so many ways. It always needs explanation. So I do agree with moving more to a simpler, and I would be cautious about the Olympic colors only because the US Olympic Committee, you know, definitely looks out for that. And that would be a big process if we were to emulate any type of rings or colors or anything like that. Not that I'm saying we're doing that, but just wanted to make sure that that was part of the conversation.
I think
Catherine,
actually
there's some PTSD for us.
I think when you think about that green, you know, I also was not involved when this brand was happening, but the green, it to me almost feels like it's mixed with like the black of the Olympic colors to make that more muted green color that we internally just kind of call the green, which is you see in the L in the Adirondacks USA and the one kind of movement leafy thing on the outside. But every other color's in here twice, but that's only in there once, and it's two colors, kind of the grayish green.
Maybe it's about simplifying the color palette though. Maybe it's about going with just like pick one. Like, is it a dark green? Is it a play on a trail marker that you then put other imagery on top of or cut out from within? I mean, that sort of would capture the outdoor experience, being in the woods, and then depending on what kind of graphic or imagery you cut out from that round, you either added or took away from that round trail marker, you could work in a venue or whatever else you wanted to.
One of the challenges that we often find at Roost when using the current color palette is that oftentimes we're kind of locked into just using the blue or the dark gray green because it doesn't meet, you know, WCAG accessible. It's not accessibly compliant. So I can't put, you know, the yellow on a white background. It just doesn't pass. It's not as legible for many users out there. So that is something when we're choosing a color palette that we can keep in mind, is to kind of make it compliant.
So when we're looking for colors that are compliant, Emily, are we looking for things that are going to pop more? Is that the goal?
No, there's like a whole scientific scale that will determine, you know, what colors are legible when placed on top of each other. Like I can tell you you know, if you were to put the yellow text on the red, that's going to be very difficult to read. You know, commonly the red text on green, very difficult to read. We've all been there. So it just has to meet, there's like this scientific scale that, you know, we can type in the values of the colors and see if it meets that compliance.
And Emily, just to give some context there, you're talking specific when it comes to web design.
Yeah. And so like we could come up with like a separate color palette, but as long as like we're kind of in the range, and, you know, so for web and, you know, print material, but yeah.
ultimately, I think what Emily's getting to is that you know, accessibility is becoming more and more important to web design, and just making sure that websites are accessible to vision impaired individuals. And I think as a whole, this particular brand, as it stands right now, it like there's not enough contrast in the colors to provide that accessibility. Um, you know, as a designer, like what I see right away is, think I challenge everybody in this call to think about when you think of a brand, it's any brand, it's what specifically comes to mind right away. It's not what we tell you, it's what you perceive the brand to be. So, whether that information comes now or it comes at a later date, through feedback, when you think of Lake Placid, what sort of imagery comes to mind immediately without any prompt? And I think that's what's really important. I don't think this mark does that, whether it's in Olympic colors or mountains or sun or moon. I think what we really need to do is just be a little bit more pointed and a little bit more simple in how we visually represent Lake Placid.
All right, thanks. Eileen, we're in 11:03.
Yep, I was just about to say. This feels like maybe a good place to leave this for now. Does anyone else have any kind of closing thoughts they want to share?
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I think all the comments so far has been pretty good. In my personal opinion, the colors of the word Lake Placid, it for me personally makes it very hard to read. You kind of have to almost look at it letter by letter. Also changing and adding some other earth tone colors to the circle in itself might be a good idea, but just making sure that the word Lake Placid is kind of one color would be my opinion on that.
Thank you, Billy. Appreciate that. Anyone else closing thoughts?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to say is as companies grow, I'm finding more they're able to change logos on a regular basis. So you'll see, companies they'll have their main logo and then they'll have like offshoots of them in different ways, and it's fun and exciting and people love different things. So that's one thing as well. You could have like a main thing and then maybe a couple smaller other things that are good for printing or merchandise or whatever you need.
Steve, do you have a specific example of what you've seen?
I can get some and send them to you because I've just been kind of looking at redoing some of my stuff and I'm like, I'm having trouble getting my logo on a hat, so I'm kind of like, hey, why don't I just design a different Old Mountain Coffee logo that's going to work well on a hat? So that's,
Yeah.
I can get some and send them to you for sure.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
one thing.
please. I mean, I would challenge everybody to take, 10 minutes, find logos. They don't even have to be destination marketing logos, right? Find logos that work really well and send them forward, as Steve just, said he'd do, just because it does help me as the designer understand where everybody's head is at visually, because sometimes it is really difficult to put into words what you're looking for, but you've seen it somewhere. So, I think any and all feedback, whether it's written or visual, is super helpful.
And also along with sending with including that is what is it that you explain what it is that you like about it, because sometimes that gets lost in interpretation. And we do have some variations. One thing, Steve, just to on that piece on here, you can see a couple of variations of the same logo. That's one thing we will do is create different lockups of how the logo is presented. And in a recent brand project we just did for the Whiteface region, we did one where like the actual mark itself, like there's a mountain biking version where we're talking about mountain biking. There's some different icons and elements that can be used. I think that aligns with that kind of example. So we've been playing around with that with some other projects as well. All right. So do you want, I think that's a good segue into next steps.
Yes. So for next steps, again, we'll be sending around a doodle poll in our follow-up email that will have some suggested meeting times for our next meeting. I believe we're going to be looking, off the top of my head, I think it's the last week of November, but that'll come around in the next poll. We are also going to give a little bit of an extension on that website feedback questionnaire. Apologies for issues with the link. Not sure what happened there, but this link here is working, has been working for folks. So if you haven't had a chance to complete that website questionnaire, please do so. If you could by end of day Friday, that would be wonderful. And then in terms of our feedback on the brand statement and the visual brand, as I said, we don't expect everybody to be able to kind of filter and convey all of their thoughts in a single meeting. So please take some time with the brand statement, with the visual brand, pull some of those examples of things that you do like and why. And if you wouldn't mind sending that additional feedback to me just in an email by end of day Monday, this coming Monday, that would be wonderful. We'll start to compile that all together so that the next time we meet, we have a better idea of kind of where the consensus is and how we can start to move forward. So I will be sending around this slide deck for reference for everybody. We will also have the meeting recording that will be sent around for folks that weren't able to join us today, or just for reference as you're looking back on the conversation. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will, help as best I can or get you to the right team member that can help. And we appreciate so much your feedback, your help, and for you being part of this conversation. Your feedback is truly invaluable. So thank you all. Roost team, anything else to add?
I don't think so. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and feedback. Michelle, Jason, Lane, anybody?
Very much. It's been a great discussion.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.